I'm Adam Pascarella, and welcome to episode 22 of The Power of Bold.
From New York City, it's The Power of Bold, the podcast on risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and bold living. Join us as we interview world-class performers, analyze life-changing books, and gather actionable insights to help you achieve your goals. Here's your host, Adam Pascarella.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this latest episode of The Power of Bold. Now, if you're a longtime listener of the show, you'll know that I've spent several episodes speaking about the importance of connecting and building relationships. I think it's such an important topic and something that we can all get better at. Well, for this episode, I spoke with someone who is a master at building strong, meaningful business relationships. His name is Ryan Paugh, and he is the co-founder and COO of The Community Company, which manages community-driven programs for companies like Forbes and Men's Health. Before The Community Company, Ryan was a co-founder of Brazen Technologies and the Young Entrepreneur Council, an invitation-only organization composed of more than 1,500 of the world's most successful young entrepreneurs. Because of his experience building strong relationships and communities, Ryan co-authored a book called Superconnector, Stop Networking and Start Building Business Relationships That Matter. Ryan has a ton of experience and knowledge about getting beyond this idea of transactional networking and building strong, long-lasting relationships. He has some great insights, and during our conversation, you'll hear us discuss topics like what a superconnector is, why introverts can become superconnectors, why building your own community is important in becoming a superconnector, and why you must navigate the pyramid of influence to increase the odds of building a real relationship with your dream connection. I found it to be a fascinating conversation, and I know you will too. Without further ado, here's Ryan Paugh.
Okay.
My guest for this episode is Ryan Paugh, the co-founder and COO of The Community Company, and co-author of this book, Superconnector, Stop Networking and Start Building Business Relationships That Matter. So Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time to appear on The Power of Bold.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Now, I've got to say that I really enjoyed Superconnector. I think about networking and building relationships all the time. So it's refreshing to hear you and your co-author, Scott Gerber, speak about relationship building rather than this transactional idea of networking, whether that's being a business card fanatic or something similar to that. So we're going to speak about how to avoid this mentality and how we can become super connectors. But before we jump into that, I'd like to delve a little bit more into your background and why you decided to write the book. So in the book, you describe how you graduated from college in 2006 and that you began working for a pharma company in New Jersey.
Yep.
Yet you weren't exactly feeling psyched about your job. So can you explain to our listeners what was wrong at that time?
Sure. Yeah. I graduated. I got a job. Typical corporate environment. Great company. Great peers. But something just wasn't jiving with me. I really wasn't enjoying my day to day. I felt like I was going through the motions, and it didn't feel like I was getting that experience that I was told I was going to get from the workforce of being able to grow and learn. And, at the same time, I didn't feel like college really prepared me very well for what I was going to experience. And it's interesting. At the time, there was a lot of other young people talking about the same thing, Gen Y/millennials getting into the workforce and really not being happy with their jobs, and a lot of Xers and boomers talking about how narcissistic we were and how we were wrong for having these sort of feelings that, the corporate world or whatever job we were getting into wasn't for us or wasn't meeting our needs as people. And it's really hard to put into words what it was that didn't feel right, but I knew something was off. And what I did to kind of get those feelings out there and to converse with others to kind of identify what was wrong, I started blogging. I started a blog about my experiences in the workforce and about some of the challenges and some of the feelings I had about that first job, alongside a buddy of mine also named Ryan Healy. He was my first business partner in my previous venture. And we started finding again that we weren't alone. This wasn't something that just that was just us, that we were feeling, dissatisfied. There were a lot of people talking and creating blogs, and that was sort of like the early social media at the time that everyone was doing. And that sort of sent out a light bulb for us that there should be a community out there, a place where people like us, young professionals entering the real world, could go to talk about these things, both with their peers and with older generations that really wanted to understand how to support and how to recruit and how to retain this new generation of talent. And that's what led us to think that we could both help people like us and get ourselves out of this current situation we were in of being in a corporate environment that we really didn't love by exiting and creating a company that was all about bringing these people together and providing them with a medium in order to talk about these challenges and find solutions. And that's how my first company, Brazen Careerists, which is now called Brazen Technologies, was born alongside Ryan and our other co-founder, Penelope.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting. When you were at your old job, like you said, you weren't feeling satisfied what you were doing, yet you didn't really sit on your hands. You took action. You created this blog. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. They feel dissatisfied where they're at. They want some change, yet sometimes they either don't know where to start or they have other priorities. And so how did you personally get over that obstacle? Did you just think of it as an experiment on the side, or how did you go about thinking about that?
Admittedly, early in my 20s when I was having these challenges, I was that person. I did have trouble identifying ways that I could help myself, and I did have trouble taking action, like many people do. And I found strength in my business partner and my friend, Ryan Healy, who I think was more entrepreneurial in the way where it's part of their DNA. That's just how they were born, and they're more type A and ready to take action, versus me, who was a little bit less type A, more type B probably. And I think that his ability to take action gave me strength and transformed me into someone who is less complacent and more willing to actually get out there and take action. And on the flip side, I think I helped him by being more analytical and being someone who's more behind the scenes, operational, willing to set stuff up, willing to be scrappy, to create something that didn't otherwise exist with very limited tool sets. So we're a great team, and I think that's one of the things for me that was really powerful, is that I had a support group and people with a common goal and a common vision, and we could count on each other to figure that out together. So I guess for people who are feeling complacent, people who are feeling like they are stuck and don't know where to get started, maybe having a partner, a co-founder, someone who has a similar challenge that they're trying to overcome would be a really great place to get started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that all makes sense. And in the book, you talk about needing to develop your own thesis about yourself before you can become a super connector, or even just someone that builds meaningful relationships. So what was your thesis at the time when you were getting started?
I think anyone who wants to be a strong connector and a strong relationship builder needs to have a strong sense of self-awareness. I think that there's a very common misconception that if you want to be great with people, you need to understand other people. But I think more important than that is, if you want to be great with other people, you need to first understand yourself, places that you thrive. More importantly than that, places where you really suck. If you're not great at huge conferences, stop going. There are plenty of ways to meet people and connect in a way that suits you, that are more intimate, more, closed events where you get to meet a handful of people and not feel the overwhelming nature of some of these big crowded events. You'll never find me at a crowded bar event where you're just kind of trying to navigate elbow to elbow with a lot of people, collecting business cards, and then at the end of the night just getting nothing other than like a buzz and a pocket full of crumbled up business cards that you're just going to throw away. I think about networking in a much more intimate sense. I try to meet people for coffee. I try to meet people for small gatherings and dinners. And when I am at big events, because I do have to go to them sometimes because of my job building community and building professional organizations, you're not going to find me at the conference center. You're going to find me at an environment that we call in the book an oasis, where I get an opportunity to really connect with people in an environment where they're not feeling stressed and frantic and like they're running around trying to network with every single person under the sun. That's where I thrive, and that was a big part of figuring out who I was early on. Not getting over the fact that I wasn't going to be the most active and engaged person in a crowded space, and I wasn't going to be the life of the party, but that I could still build meaningful connections and build community in a powerful way as a more introverted type B person. In fact, just from going through the book and interviewing all of these great community builders and superconnectors, some of my favorites and some of the best, arguably, are people that are more introverted type B, is not the extroverted person that you would probably paint a portrait of if you were to, just hear the word superconnector and think about who that person would be. It's actually someone a lot different than a lot of people are probably thinking.
Yeah, and that's exactly my assumption going into this book, is that I needed to be some suave, charismatic person that just owns networking events and things like that. But you're right, it seems like most of the really successful superconnectors are more type B introverts. And I guess going back to what you said earlier, you identified your strengths and weaknesses. Was that more intuitive, or did you actually sit down and self-reflect and engage in some exercises to figure that out?
Yeah, I asked myself a lot of questions. Some of them we cover in the book, but I also took things a step further, which is something we didn't address in the book, and that's asking others, your loved ones and your peers, what they think about you. Where they believe you are incredibly strong, and where they believe that you're weak. Because it's very hard to diagnose yourself, right? It's helpful to have someone around you who you trust, who you know is going to give you candid and honest feedback, to be able to also give you some feedback so you can compare notes between your assessment and their assessment and find a really strong truth about who you are and how you should be investing your time and what you should be doing and how you should be spending your time as a person, right? Mm-hmm. I think early on I had this sort of belief about myself that was untrue, and because of my own self-reflection, but also the feedback I got from my peers, I was able to actually really dial in and change my trajectory. I went into business with my business partners at Brazen thinking that I was going to be the CEO type A individual, and it turns out that I could offer a lot of value, really important value to the business in other areas where I was stronger, and that was community building. And that self-reflection and that self-awareness that I was able to build early on is what took me down that path of becoming a community builder, eventually starting the community company, and doing everything that I do today, which is more hands-on community building, and I love it. It's the reason I get up every day. If I was doing the role of a CEO, out there wheeling and dealing all day and presenting to our board, I probably would have had a panic attack by now and quit entrepreneurship forever. So I'm really glad that I had people early on to help support me in that self-awareness and figure out where I should be focusing myself and where I was the strongest.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting perspective. And back when you were at Brazen at the Young Entrepreneurs Council, which is another organization you co-founded, and now the community company, what were some of the mistakes you made with connecting or networking, and what can we learn from that?
Gosh, early on, I feel like I was better than I am now, because in some cases, back then, I was able to network and connect and spend a lot of time hands-on community building in a more intimate way with the people that matter to our businesses. Today with the community company, which has become a much larger organization, creeping up into the hundreds of employees, I'm spending a lot more time as a COO, a lot more time heads down, and a lot of time kind of delegating and educating my team to be stronger community builders, because they have time to have that intimate connection and to be more a part of the day-to-day lives of the members of any of the communities that we've created. So my biggest challenges aren't actually ones that I had early on, but challenges today, which are about me learning how to scale my role and be more comfortable being a leader versus being the person who's in the trenches and dealing with all the problems and dealing with the day-to-day. that right now is my biggest challenge. Is learning how to be a leader, learning how to delegate, and learning how to pass off responsibilities that I was once really excited about doing, and in some cases had to do because we didn't have the resources in the team, in trade for being more of like the high level leadership person that I am today. And I'm getting better, but it's just a day in, day out struggle to learn how to do that. I think some of the best C-suite leaders on the planet still have trouble with certain aspects of that if you were to talk to them and they were to be truthful.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely true. If they were truthful, that's right. And so can we go back a little bit, and can you speak about how you met your co-author, Scott Gerber, and how it led to the creation of the book? Because it seems like the principles you espouse in the book are exemplified with how you met him and how you actually created it.
Yeah, I'll start that off by saying that, the best connections and relationships that you have could take weeks, months, years even to provide any bounty in return that's really meaningful to your life in terms of providing opportunity that's life-changing. So Scott Gerber and I met through a mutual friend by the name of Dan Chabell, and he's an author of several books. The most current book is upcoming and releasing this fall. It's called Back to Human, and it's about getting back to the human relationship building tactics that really create the most meaningful relationships. A great pickup to where we left off with Superconnector. So I encourage everyone to go check that out. But Dan has been a friend for many years. We met through the community we built at Brazen Careerist, and we stayed friends, and we always supported each other through our entrepreneurial ventures. And one day Dan and I were vacationing together in Cape Cod with our families, and Dan was telling me about this great guy he just talked to named Scott, and he had this cool new entrepreneur community that he was creating, and I should really talk to them. And Dan's more of that type A guy, right? So he's just still on point, doing business while we're vacationing on the beach, and I'm more in my relax mode. So at the time, I was saying, yeah, Dan, great, shut up, I'm relaxing, we're at the beach, please just enjoy the beauty that is surrounding us. And I put off meeting Scott for many weeks. But eventually when I met him and took the time to talk to him about what he was building, which was at then a very early on version of YEC, Young Entrepreneur Council, the organization that we co-founded together, I saw something brilliant and something that had a lot of potential to be the next great entrepreneurship organization. And after getting to know him for months and months, I'd fly out to New York several times to just walk around Manhattan and talk business. We decided to partner up and turn this into our next business together. And that's how YEC was born, which eventually turned into the community company and everything we do today. But just to circle back, again, I know Dan for many years. We spent a lot of time building trust and building a friendship. And it took a lot of time for an opportunity to present itself that Dan could provide to me. Being a great community builder like he is, when he met Scott, he immediately connected the dots and saw that the two of us need to meet, because if we do, something magical will happen, and it did. But I think that's a really important takeaway. And again, if people want to learn more about that story, it's chapter 1 of the book. But if you don't read it, the important takeaway is this: Superconnectors realize that real relationships take real time, and the most amazing opportunities and the bounty that you can get from building strong relationships isn't something that's going to present itself tomorrow after you meet this person. Might take weeks, might take months, might take years, but these relationships will change your life. My relationship with Dan that eventually led me to Scott changed my life and took me on a path that has provided me and my family a lot of success and a lot of joy. And I don't know what my life would look like without that connection. So just remembering that investments in people and what those relationships can inevitably provide to you is not an 8-minute abs formula. It takes time. It takes a lot of trust to be built, and a lot of connections and time supporting each other. And you should really focus on giving before you expect to give back with those types of people.
Yeah, that's a cool story, and I do want to get to that point about patience in a little bit, because I think it's super important. But we've been talking about this idea of a superconnector, and that's the title of your book, obviously. But for people that haven't read it, I think the original word came from Keith Ferrazzi's Never Eat Alone, and it's a terrific book. We've talked about it on the podcast recently. But for those that are unfamiliar with your book or that book, can you just briefly describe what a superconnector is, and maybe how Dan was a superconnector compared to just some regular connector?
Yeah, sure. We define superconnector as this next generation of tradespeople, born out of the social media era, the Internet 2.0 era, where connecting with other people seems more easy than ever before because of the open web and the Facebooks and the LinkedIns and the Twitters. We can connect with anyone under the sun.
Yeah.
But really, it's made it more difficult to create real relationships, the relationships that matter because of all the noise. For every true, honest leader with amazing potential and amazing insights, there's 10 hucksters that are just pretending to be something that they're not, that can trick you into thinking that they're worth your time. Super connectors are people who learn to transcend the media era and this false sense of connecting that's more transactional and focused on quantity over quality, and create real relationships in the way that any super connector knows they should be created, in a more personalized manner and more focused on, again, the quality aspect of who you're connecting with. Super connectors know that the most successful people out there are people that have invested their time into a very small circle of people that support one another. You'd think that someone like Richard Branson, let's just say, for example, with probably millions of Twitter followers, got there because of that celebrity status. But really, the celebrity status came later on. And I would imagine if you were to ask Richard how he became so successful, it's because of a small, very intimate circle of people. Mm-hmm. And that whole celebrity internet status thing came later on.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Everyone today is all about getting as many likes or followers as possible, and it's really more important to emphasize quality over quantity. I totally agree on that front. And you were saying earlier that, and in the book you say that you're more introverted, you're more type B. So is it true that anyone can become a super connector? Like, for some people that may think, oh, I'm on the quieter side, I'm not the life of the party. Anyone can do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, like we said earlier, I think that in some respects, the introvert types out there have a leg up in becoming a super connector, because instead of being the person who always feels like they have to lead the conversation and be sort of like the center of like any conference or any big crowded event, they actually sort of shut up and listen and really diagnose what other people are talking about, learn about their challenges, learn about what's exciting to them. And if you are a strong connector, you're really just taking in all that data and creating like, a finished puzzle in your brain. You're figuring out how to connect the dots and figure out how you can support them, or how someone else in your network or a resource you have access to could support them. You're less talking and more listening, and getting a lot more insights in the process that allow you to be a really strong connector to begin with. Mm-hmm. I think actually a lot of extroverts who are connectors struggle with that, actually taking the back seat and listening. So in that regard, introverts, you guys have like some superpowers too. And I feel like at the end of the day, we have to embrace and understand that is a strength and not a weakness.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome to hear. And if I can go back to what you were saying earlier, just about this whole idea of patience and just not looking for instant gratification when you're meeting people. Now, as I said earlier, I live in New York City, and every single night there's a meetup or some event that you can go to. Yep. And at these meetups or networking events, people are just handing out business cards, and they're looking for some quick, instant gratification. And I think what you say in the book is great, obviously. I mean, you have to be patient, you have to let these connections bloom, but people still want that instant gratification. So how can people change their mindset to overcome that? Yeah.
I think, again, it's all about quality over quantity. And I think in a lot of situations, right, we let FOMO take over, fear of missing out, and that sort of forces us to go down these similar paths, to be at every single networking event that's happening in the city and be a part of every single circle. And we just end up exhausting ourselves and spend a lot of time talking to people where there's no mutual value that's ever going to come of that, and taking part in these transactional types of meetups that really, again, like, just provide nothing else other than like a buzz and a bunch of crumpled up pieces of paper that you're going to throw away. How to get over that specific challenge is really just, again, to be true to yourself and to understand that, you know, your time is your most valuable asset. And at the end of the day, you know, if you take a step back and think about the value of that event, and maybe just throwing a dart at a dartboard and hitting a bullseye, you know, which has such a small chance of probability of happening, is that worth your time? Or is perhaps spending time, you know, at home by yourself, blogging, sharing your ideas, building some sort of medium to show the world who you are, connecting with a few people intimately online who you think you could build a relationship with, is that more worth your time? And then being able to maybe take some of these relationships a step deeper and schedule time for yourselves on a weekday, instead of going to this big event and having dinner with this human, or having coffee, or maybe connecting a group, maybe a half a dozen to a dozen or so people with a common vision, and doing a dinner in your apartment with these people to help bring that circle together. So you can not only build relationships with them, but you can also be sort of that community building leader that's also connecting them with one another. You know, thinking outside of the box is probably the best advice I can give, to just recognize that, you know, we don't have to follow the status quo. We can make connections, and arguably more meaningful ones, by taking a different approach. You know, one of my favorite people in the book, John Levy, he does these dinners maybe once a month, where he brings together really cool leaders and entrepreneurs from various different sectors to his home to cook dinner and have conversations with one another. And those meetups are so much more valuable than any conference or event they would actually attend at any point throughout the year. You know, some of the relationships they build there are so true and so real that, you know, it's just amazing what can happen when we get back to the basics of connecting with each other in a more human way, not in this big crowded conference with all the buzz and all the noise. That's what I suggest. Just don't listen to the status quo. Think outside the box. There's some great showcases and great people that you can get inspiration from in the book. But also, if you do read the book, realize that it's not gospel. Realize that you shouldn't follow everything that we say to a T, because you will fail. At the end of the day, this is a book that's meant to inspire you. You know, steal the things that work for you and apply them to your own life. But also, like, think about things that you can come up with on your own that are even more applicable to your own life. Yeah. Not everything in the book's going to be applicable to you. And again, it goes back to having that strong sense of self-awareness that is going to guide you on what the right path is for you to take in terms of how you build relationships in your life.
Yeah, that's all great advice. And speaking of John Levy, I was going to ask you about him because I heard about him in the past. There was a New York Times article on his dinners, and people like Bill Nye, the science guy, showed up. He had some really interesting people. And it sounds like, I mean, he has a huge loft apartment to hold these dinners, which is a major advantage. And so for people that want to do something like that may not have the resources, or say, for instance, that they just moved to a new city, they graduated from college and want to meet people and build out their network, so to speak. How can they get started doing that today?
You know, I mean, there's just dozens of great communities in every city across the country for, you know, this type of meetup, and they're not all meeting in crowded bars like we talked about before. Many of them are creating more experiential events that you can be a part of. If you don't have that loft, there are plenty of people that are already, you know, with those resources doing these types of things. But if you want to lead on your own and create your own community and become a community builder yourself in your own city, not having that loft apartment shouldn't stop you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of ways you can do that. There's great companies out there that are filling up spaces and venues all around your city that aren't filled, and you could probably get that at a discounted rate and group pay for a very intimate dinner in the back of a really swanky, awesome new restaurant in any city that you're a part of. You guys could meet literally in the middle of Central Park if you're in New York City.
Right.
And do a picnic, and it will probably cost you nothing. Just thinking outside the box a little bit here. There's a million different things you can do, and it's not all about having a ritzy New York City apartment. It's about who you bring together. That curated group matters that much more than the venue that you're going to. Making sure that it's a high quality group, not too big. Could have that meetup anywhere in a Starbucks, and I'm sure that there would be some value. I don't recommend doing it in Starbucks,
Right.
but I'm just saying some value would come out of that, even if you were to do it in that simplistic of a way.
When you say high quality group, how do you go about selecting the initial group members? Because I guess the idea in theory is that you select a small group, and from there they tell their friends, and you bring in more people into the group, and it cycles from there. But how do you select those first couple of people?
Yeah, it depends on the goal of the group and what you're trying to create. But I think one common misconception that I avoid is all these people need to be very similar in nature. Like they need to all be from the same industry. Like you being a former lawyer, for example, can you imagine if you got, a dozen lawyers together, how valuable that would be? Probably not incredibly valuable because you're all in the same world. You all know the same things. And in some respects, you might compete with each other. Where I find that the real magic happens is that, getting people from various industries with different strengths and weaknesses and a high degree of diversity is what makes real magic happen. Because you guys can support each other in ways that, a group of people in just your specific profession couldn't, because you all know the same stuff. But imagine what happens when you bring people together that have some common bond, right? There always should be something. And that could be something as simple as, I want to meet cool entrepreneurs in my city. I just moved here, and I'm sure there's other people that want to do that too. From there, it'd be great if that group was incredibly diverse. If you had brick and mortar people high tech, and everything in between, that would create, I think, the most valuable and interesting group to be a part of. People with experiences and skill sets in various industries across the board.
Right. And then just starting out, you maybe canvas your own network that you already have, and then ask for referrals and go from there. It seems like you got to start somewhere.
Sure. And you know what? In some cases, maybe it just stays this inner circle of people, right? Not every community needs to have a model for growth or needs to be a business the way that YEC and the community company has become a business. It's nice that it's become that for me because I love community building so much, and now I get paid to do it every day. But that might not be you, and you just want to build really solid relationships that help you continue to grow in that specific career path that you've chosen. Mm-hmm. And maybe that small group of people is all that it takes. A mastermind that meets once a month. It doesn't need to have a referral program and a growth plan. It can just be a small group of people that support one another on a regular basis with specific business challenges that come up.
Right. And so you have this group, you have this community that you built, and say, for instance, you want to meet someone that's, I guess, more A-list, if you'd call it, like someone, like one of your dream meetings with Richard Branson, like you said, or someone like that. I'd like to ask a little how you pull that off, and I did want to reference one part of the book that I found really awesome. It's that you suggest that you should go after these people's assistants and team members first, building the relationship with them. And it's not, a cynical relationship. You're actually building a solid relationship, and then from there you meet the person that you kind of really want to meet. And it's funny because I was just at an investing conference last week, and there was a pretty big hedge fund manager that spoke. And after, everyone just flooded him trying to get his contact information. Meanwhile, his colleague was just standing over to the side, just watching the scrum happen. And it really reminded me of what you said in the book. And so, can you maybe talk about that, just the value of speaking with assistants and team members and how you go about doing it?
Yeah. So I think if you want to meet a celebrity entrepreneur or just a celebrity, whatever it might be, go into that with expectations of what's going to happen. It's probably going to be a really cool moment. You're going to take a picture, you're going to post it on social, all your friends are going to like and love it and think it's really cool. But I think it's really rare for that actual person to be someone who's going to change your life, right? Where they're at in their life and their level of success makes it really difficult to kind of, execute on supporting someone else in that meaningful of a way. But they have people that work for them that are probably, in a better position to do so. So, you want to partner with Gary Vee's company. I'm just throwing a new name into the mix because I'm sick of talking about Richard Branson. You want to partner with VaynerMedia. Who do you go to? Gary? Probably not. But there are people 1, 2, 3 rungs down the ladder at that company that are probably responsible for partnerships and creating new relationships and managing sponsorships that are the people that actually make the decisions. I think someone like Gary is incredibly busy being Gary. He is going to delegate that off to someone else anyway. So we tell people to focus on, instead of that sort of like celebrity up top, is people in their pyramid of influence. That can be someone 1, 2, 3 rungs down the company who actually makes the decisions or can influence that person in making a decision for them. That can be their personal assistant, someone who actually runs their life and is incredibly important to them. It could be a spouse. It could be a variety of different things. But rarely, again, are you going to get to that point where you are getting your desired outcome from the celebrity without influencing first one of them. So again, going back to the book, I think you're referring to the chapter where we actually pull a story from Keith Ferrazzi, who did the foreword for the book, and he was talking about wanting to meet Hillary Clinton, right? And he brought up a similar story to what you just mentioned, where there was like this hedge fund guy that you really wanted to meet, and everyone just flocked to the stage, right? And no one was really paying attention to the person off to the side that might have been their assistant or someone that worked for them. Keith's experience was actually very similar. So everyone flocked to Hillary after this big event, and off to the side was just this person who eventually whispered in Hillary's ear that no one was paying attention to her, and that was her executive assistant. And he spent time getting to know her. He actually continued the relationship after the event. He learned at the event that their family was going on this vacation, and he actually gifted them an upgrade on their trip, which was pretty cool. And eventually, Hillary came back into town, and that executive assistant remembered everything that Keith did, and they had a strong relationship at this point. And he invited Keith to go meet with Hillary in a more intimate setting where they actually got to talk and actually got to build a relationship. Because of that focus that he put on the pyramid of influence people, he actually got a much better opportunity to really get to know Hillary that the people that were just racing to shake her hand at the event are never going to get.
Right. And again, it's all about patience. You have to be in it for the long game. You could seek that instant gratification when they leave the stage, but really you're in it for the long run, which is much more positive.
If you want the Hillary Clinton picture for your Facebook, maybe go race up there and do that. If you want like the real genuine relationship, understand that real relationships take real time, and there's a strategy behind it in order to do it right.
Yeah. And if I can ask you too, we just have a couple more minutes here. If just about the art of following up. So say that you meet someone for the first time or even the second time, and you feel like you've built a solid, starting relationship with them, but you want to pursue it further. How do you go about pinging that person? Do you wait until they ping you? Like, what's your general sense on that?
Yeah, it's like dating, right?
Yeah.
How long do you wait to text? Who texts who first? Like, it's funny. There is a strategy to that. There's not a right or wrong strategy, but I think it's important at the end of the day to always be thoughtful. When you follow up with people, I think it's important to make sure that you recall something or put a little personal spin on it to remind them of something you talked about at the event. Show that you were really listening and showing that you were thoughtful enough to follow up with more than just, hey, great to meet you. Let's set up time to talk. Maybe there are synergies, which is one of the most annoying things that I get in emails sometimes from people who want to connect. What is really important, again, beyond that personal touch, I think that's a strong and powerful weapon, is to be very thoughtful about why you want to follow up with them, why you may want to reconnect after an event. Explain what the value is. Don't write a diatribe. We're not talking about 10 paragraphs worth of why this person should work with your company or want to hire you or whatever the goal is. Quick, simple, concise understanding of what the value of reconnecting with them would be. Most people again stick to the very common, I think there's synergies, and if I took every synergy type of meeting that came into my inbox, I would be taking meetings day in, day out, 7 days a week, with no time for anything else in my business. You got to be respectful of people's time and understand that time spent is time that they now can't spend building their company or doing something else that's important to them. So it's important to make sure that the value is there that you see, so people have an opportunity to opt that there is mutual value, or to opt out and explain why. And I think that's really important to do, and it will actually open a lot more doors than, again, if you just put out some templated email that you could have sent to anyone under the sun that you met at any event.
Right, and you get a better sense of that value through small talk, and in the book I like your recommendations on that. You kind of have to approach small talk with an objective, and by doing that you gather insights, and even after the conversation you can immediately start thinking, how can I provide value to them? And so it's about paying attention to the details and just thinking from a value creation perspective, it seems like.
100%. I think some of the best super connectors are highly organized people, and they've got systems for actually how they keep track of all this information, because it's a lot. It's important to retain it. I think I recall Steve Sims, which is another really cool guy in the book that we talked about. He takes notes on his phone constantly when he's meeting people, and it's funny what he's writing down. Just little things like the kind of whiskey that someone liked to drink. Just these little thoughtful things that will allow them to continue to build a meaningful relationship later. Not just professional stuff, not just surface level stuff, like just meaningful stuff. Stuff about someone that transcends business. And even shows that you're getting to know them on a personal level too.
Right. And if I can ask the last question here, this book's about building relationships with other people, being a super connector. But for you personally, who's your dream connection that you'd like to make in business, and how would you even go about making that connection?
God, it's a really tough question. I think that I love building communities, and I think right now I will say my meaningful connections that I'm interested in making are people that have a strong sense of community around them. Someone like Martha Stewart. I'm obsessed right now in my life, in my 30s. I'm not a cool 20-something anymore, with my home, with gardening, with cooking for my family. And I actually think Martha Stewart's pretty damn cool. And she's got a strong sense of community around her brand. How would I meet Martha? Again, I would focus on her pyramid of influence, on the people surrounding Martha that really matter to her, that help her make decisions, that help run her business empire, if I wanted to get my foot in the door there. Because again, it's rarely that person at the top that can make real business decisions and make business happen. It's the operators and the people that are working for them that really hold the influence and really can get stuff going for you. So focusing in on them and not getting so uber focused on the celebrity at the top is really important if you want to make business happen and build really meaningful relationships.
Yeah, not only that, but showing how you can provide value to them. It's not just you taking the value, you're providing value to all of them as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this has been great, Ryan. Thank you so much for appearing. And last thing, if people want to learn more about you or perhaps get in touch, where do they go for that?
Sure. So on Twitter, it's just Ryan Paugh, and you can find me there and ask any community building or relationship questions you have. I'm always happy to respond and provide my insights. If you want to learn more about the book and decide if it's worth picking up a copy, I would go to superconnectorbook.com You can read some testimonials and insights. And then if you want to get to know what we do at the community company, go to community.co and just read up on all the great communities that we're building. And if you think there might be a partnership opportunity, reach out. We'd be happy to talk.
Cool. But then keep the lessons from the book in mind before you reach out, right? Just
Exactly.
make sure.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks again, Ryan. I'll put all of that in the show notes, and I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
All right, take care. Again, that was Ryan Paugh, the co-founder and COO of The Community Company and co-author of Superconnector. Superconnector isn't your traditional networking book, and you should check it out if you're interested in going beyond paint-by-numbers networking and building strong professional relationships that last. It's such an important topic, so I encourage you to jump on this, whether that's reading Ryan's book or just forcing yourself out of your comfort zone and changing the way that you network. And let me know how things go. You can always get in touch with me through our social media pages or by emailing adam@thepowerofbold.com. I look forward to hearing from you. That's it for this episode of The Power of Bold. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Power of Bold. For show notes and the transcript of this episode, visit thepowerofbold.com. Feel free to get in touch